Welcome back to another episode of Imagine More. How
Oh,
you
we're
guys
back.
doing tonight? Huh? Are we live?
I'm doing good. Is still connected? No, we're live.
Okay. Yeah, we're still connected. Sorry, guys. We've had some technical issues this this late evening, um, and so, but we're here. We're ready to go. We're back. As I was saying earlier, we're back after 2 weeks. It was sobering past couple days. President Trump has been elected as of Monday, and he's done some crazy stuff already. And so we're looking forward to talking to you about what he's done so far. And I don't think it came as a surprise that what he's done is kind of what he always said he was going to do. But me and Seth, we just want to give our perspective on what are some of these policies, some of the effects of these policies, where we see this is going. And so that's a lot of our show's going to be about today. It's going to be about increasing you guys' awareness of these executive orders, what has legs, what doesn't. So, without further ado, man, how you been, Seth?
I've been overall pretty good. My personal life. Obviously, I'm not too thrilled about the state of our world right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially since America is supposed to be like the leader of the free world,
Yeah.
and the presidency is controlled by the oligarchy now, a new controlled formed oligarchy,
Yeah.
and the leader of that oligarchy is a Nazi who does salutes. So, not a great time to be an American.
Not at all. It's a very bad time, and
Yeah.
but we gotta kind of keep our heads up and you know and just keep trying along. It's only 4 years. So gotta make the most of it, the best of it. So
And like I've been saying, it's only really going to be like 2 years, until the midterms, and Trump is going
hmm
to get what get done during that time. But after that point, it would be unprecedented for Republicans to maintain a majority. We're really suffering through the next
most
2
definitely.
years if he can get anything passed. Which if I mean he did a lot of executive orders, so he's going to get a lot of stuff done regardless of legislative setback. So that's just something
Yeah.
that we're gonna have to undo in the next 2, 4, 10 years.
Yeah, definitely.
So
And
what do you think about 40%? What do you feel about? Oh, sorry, are we having a level?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I was gonna say, what do we think about sure you pretending like Elon Musk didn't do a Nazi salute. It was out to the people. That's what they're saying. Do you think Americans are that stupid?
That's the spin on that. That's what they've been spending today. That the heart goes out to the people.
Well,
That's the new spin.
yeah, that's like the entire all. They're all like, guys, it's not a Nazi salute. Obviously,
Wow.
he's saying his heart goes out to the people. So
That was a very interesting way of doing that. No, it was definitely a nonsense salute. I don't
yeah,
think you could get around that. I mean, you can spin as much as you want to. I think that maybe his intent wasn't there. Uh, Maybe he can make an argument that wasn't the intent,
yeah,
but that was definitely Nazi. Like the just the way he did it was just very fascist, and his
yeah.
how he demonstrated whatever he was feeling. But yeah, I mean, there's no secret. I mean, I don't think. I mean, this talks about Trump just signed one of the executive orders he signed was to remove DEI officers from the federal government. He's also removing equal opportunity language from all federal government postings. I think this is just his way of, you know, his formalization of what he believes that society should be, which is predominantly white, lack of diversity, um, controlled the country. I mean, that's just what it is. That's his belief system, and I don't think his belief system really hasn't changed from the campaign trail. It's the same campaign messages, the same he's doing it right now in his policies. And you know, I don't think that we should be shocked or at all. I mean, that's just what he believes. I do think that we have a responsibility, um, as a country, to accept that this is what we put in power, and accept that he's going to cause racial divides. I mean, but I think the people who elected him knows that. So it's kind of a hard thing to be like, well, the people who elected him doesn't think he's racist, but I mean, you knew he causes racial divides, and he's just doubling down on
Yeah.
what people elected him to do, would continue that racial divide, to say that minorities, guess what, you don't have enough to. We don't want to include these programs to involve you. We just want to say it's merit based, right? And that's what we're disguising everything
Yeah.
as merit based, right? Like, oh, we don't want to show that there's a disparity. But then if you look at his cabinet, they're 90% white, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, what message are you sending there? So you're telling me
Yeah.
that
Do you
ninety
remember seeing
percent of
that?
his cabinet.
That sorry. There's that graph where it was like Trump and all this stuff who were not offered a cabinet position, and it was like Mark Robinson, Tim Scott, Byron Donald. It was
Mm-hmm.
like only the black members that were. So he was just using them the campaign trail, and then he obviously, when the time came down to it, he's like, "No, I'm not giving them any semblance of power." On is like,
Exactly.
yes, and paper, on paper, you could be like, yeah, that maybe that could theoretically just be an awkward hand movement or something, until you provide context, and then you like have seen his Twitter feed and the kind of things that he likes and the people he supports and promotes and hangs around with, like on Reddit message boards.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's indicative of a deeper pattern.
It definitely is. I mean, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I just think that the reality is, I just think that the reality is that you know we've elected this person because I haven't elected him, but the people who voted for him, they wanted this energy, and it's like, is that energy gonna be fruitful or is
Yeah,
it
I
not gonna
think
be
that
fruitful? That's
I think the deeper
the
problem
what.
is not just the people that are. The deeper problem is people, not just people buying in fully to his the most like honest, which is dark side of his messaging. It's that
Mm-hmm.
people are willing to dismiss their own values when it's clear that he is everything that we say and fear, and they're just unwilling to see that aspect, or you know they're willing to deny reality just for like political power and like short-term gain. They're willing to overlook things that they would never if it was anybody on the other side or even remotely oppositional. So I find that a major
Well,
problem. Hitler did not come to power because he had full support of Germany to execute all of the Jews. It was different people, concessions to power, concessions to financial gain, concessions for my own, rather not getting for my own safety. Just the people who straight up just handed it over. Germany did not. It's just matters of proximity to power. People clearly don't have any real values in the country. We thought this was you know freedom loving American to
yeah.
overlook every single thing that we've seen just because they're more. And I don't know. There's a bigger problem on both sides, but I think the problem is pretty damn clear that Republicans are much more of a danger to democracy. Are we still connected? It's giving me some notifications.
Yeah, you're breaking in and out. I did hear just of what you
You still
said.
hear me?
Yeah, I could still hear you. I think that I can't say Republicans, the elected ones, are what's causing the problem right now because they haven't done anything. They haven't passed any legislation. All this stuff is done, but everything that he's done so far has been through executive orders. So he's not even giving the. Stuff, are you with me? How's that?
I can hear you. It's just my
Okay.
side.
Yeah. So he's not even giving them the Republicans opportunity to put their name on it because he's actually doing everything through executive order. And the reason why I harp extremely hard on people who voted for him is because his values are always on display. So you can't sit there and say you're either with him or you're not. You can't sit there and say, well, his values I don't align with, but his policies I do align with. His policies and his values are one and the same. I think when I
Hmm.
look at one of the things that I always say that Trump is strong in is marketing and business. Um, the thing that I think that his biggest weakness is his mouth because he's very divisive. But for me, what I saw in his first 2 days of office, it just he went straight to divisiveness. He goes like, "Well, I'm just gonna divide the country because that works for me, and that's my lane." And he doubled down on that. Had a had a whole rally, and that whole rally was geared on Biden want to do this, he want to do that, Biden part in this, and that became his opening debut of what his 4 years are going to look like. What I think is a lot of people are going to tune it out. And I think that's dangerous because what happens is when we tune him out, which happens inevitably, he's going to do more and more stuff to get more and more attention. And that's really, I mean, when I looked at his TV ratings for the inauguration, that was like the lowest TV rating inauguration since, I don't know, I think since Bill Clinton, something like that. Like it was really low.
Yeah,
And
probably the because we haven't had a lot of election.
second,
I said probably since Bill Clinton's reelection because it makes him much less interesting to most Americans. Like it's not really a new presidency; it's more a return to 4 years ago. So
yeah. And so that's why I think that he's going to do more sensationalism because that's how that's his gift, it's his marketing gift. So the reality is he's going to stick to more sensational topics. I mean, right now, I think I saw a topic where he just ordered, I think like in a couple hours past, he just ordered 1,500 troops to the U.S. border, and it's like, those are people like, wow, troops are going to the U.S. border, right? And so people are thinking like, oh, the troops are going to really stop, the cartel from coming in. And it's like, no, the
yeah,
U.S. troops can't even operate on U.S. soil. So it's like stuff like that. It's like he does it, people react, but
yeah.
if you know the law, you're like, he can't do anything. They're just going to sit there because they can't actually have
His actions are
they're very
performative.
performative. They're not. I was watching the rally, and he was talking about some of his executive orders. He would literally say something like, "I'm ordering the federal government to stop looking at diversity as a criteria." I'm like, you can't even do that. That's not even an order. He was just making statements, and then people were taking like, "Oh my
Yeah,
god, he's really changing something," and I'm like, you can't fall for that because it's like it sounds great. It sounds like he's doing something, But the reality, what he's just doing is dividing us and doing nothing in the process. that's
Yeah.
that to me I find funny because it's like we're being divided, but he actually hasn't done anything. People feel like
Yeah.
he has, So we're in this weird quagmire because people is like he's dividing us on nothing, which is kind of I've never seen that before. At least as you were saying earlier with Hitler, there was an actual plan in place to discriminate against a group of people, and they've actually effectuate that plan. Here, there's no plan. He's just making statements of just saying like, "Yeah, your life is crappy. It's because of diversity and inclusion. That's why your life is crappy." You're like, your life is crappy. It's because of immigration and the Mexicans over there. The reason why people in Michigan don't have a job, like the Mexicans in Mexico, it's the reason why people in
Yeah.
the in the blue states don't have jobs, and like stuff like that. It's like clearly that's an
It
idiotic
doesn't make.
statement, but then it uses it.
Yeah.
It compels people to be like, "Oh, that's true," and it's like, no, that's just read a book. People in Mexico has nothing in fact to do with the fact that automation, AI, machines has taken a lot of these jobs away. I was reading a study, and I feel like I'm on a soapbox,
Yeah.
so just cut me off anytime, Seth. But I was reading, so watching
Sure.
this face. I think Joe Rogan and the Meta Facebook. What's his name? Mark Zuckerberg. He was just saying that, you know, over the next 5 years, his AI agent, which if you guys don't know what AI agents are, so if you guys heard the term AI, which is artificial intelligence, what it essentially has been doing now, it's like you ask it a question, it responds to you. It's like a Siri on steroids. An AI agent is like the Siri if Siri had a personality, right? And
Yeah.
so Mark Zuckerberg was saying that his AI agents now are going to have the ability to code and do engineering work, like computer engineering work and computer programming, and that will literally replace most of all the mid-level computer programmers at Facebook. So literally at Facebook, he's going to wipe out like thousands of jobs. You're right. And then what Trump will say?
Hmm.
It's the Mexicans. I'm telling you, it's them that's losing. This is why these people are losing their jobs. And it's like,
Or just blame liberals in
yeah,
general.
oh yeah, it's the Democrats, the progressive policies. It's like no, it's called technology. It's like
Yeah.
that's what happens. Technology happens. So you can take two approaches. You can take the progressive approach, which is try to find progressive jobs to help people, or you can take the approach as Trump is saying. It's like, hey, we're just gonna blame all these people. We're gonna say all this stuff, but we're not gonna actually change or move the needle because there's so many things he proclaimed on an executive order yesterday or on Monday that legally has no binding. There's only one that I said that's really effective, not because it was a good, but actually has some teeth to it, and that's the executive order that essentially ends birthright citizenships, which it had some teeth.
He did. That's an official thing. I thought it was contemplative.
No, he actually signed it. He signed the executive order.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Hmm.
That's so stupid. Obviously something that's gonna be reversed, but we're always gonna remember like the 2 4 year period in which like
Yeah.
people were born in America, but they're not American citizens. There's gonna be
Yeah.
a subset of people.
Yeah. And I was reading that.
It's so
Go ahead.
unnecessary.
What are you saying?
I was just saying it's just so unnecessary. But like we were saying, most of the things are pretty non consequential. Like the government legally recognizing only two genders, like that's just like you were saying, that's just meant to divide. It's just meant to militarize his own base and make them feel like he's doing something for them when really he
Yeah.
isn't doing anything that's going to impact them in any positive way. So you just have to do things that like get them riled up. So
Yeah, Jeannie has this
that's a
saying.
distraction, like they've all been saying.
It is.
Go ahead.
Jeannie has this saying, which is like, and she's very true. But Republicans, they
Hmm.
show, right? So what they do is
Hmm.
they say something, and Democrats don't say anything, right? So that's the Republicans. The thing is like Republicans, for example, we have Democrats. We believe certain things, but we don't really, you know, we don't stick to divisiveness issues. And because I think as Democrats and progressive, our focus is mostly on coming together. But when you have that
Hmm.
undertone all the time, it seems like you don't believe in anything. And that's what, most people, I think that's what's wrong with our messaging in the party. It's just like, it's like Bernie doesn't have that problem. Bernie, like, he has his four issues. He's gonna say it over and over. He has great messaging, but the rest of the Democrat Party has terrible
Yeah.
messaging, right? It just seems like we don't believe anything because we just keep saying a whole bunch of stuff that we're not coalescing around an idea. And Trump is, and that is the power of Trump, because Trump coalesces around an idea, and people can understand that idea.
Hmm.
And so, what once again, like what Jenny says, is like Republicans show and Democrats don't say much. And what I believe that means is Republicans stay on message, they communicate the same idea over and over, and Democrats would tend to try to get everyone on the boat. It's like, hey, we,
I think that um I think that it's an interesting point that well, I think that Republicans are more consistent to their own values.
yeah,
I think that's the thing is they're more representative of now they are selling out, but that's not something they're opposed to. That's the thing.
yeah,
So the fact that they're controlled by owner classes and by big business and all these special interests,
hmm,
it comes across as more genuine than the Democrats
yeah,
because the Democrats are doing it, but like they're making concessions to their own message because
hmm,
it's less electorally viable. Republicans basically do whatever the fuck they want, and their voters will support them.
yeah,
The Democrats come across as disingenuous because they have certain values, but they have such a broader tent of people they're trying to please,
hmm,
from their own voter base to the donor base to the perceived independents and moderates that are supposed to be swinging back and forth in between
yeah,
elections. So Democrats have just such a monotone message, a general vague, like universal health care instead of like actually subsets of
yeah,
policies, which I don't know that the voter base necessarily wants a list of policies as much as they want like a vision, which Republicans will offer. It's easier to offer a vision as a Republican because it's just like, think in the past. What's the time that you liked? We want it to be like that, and you don't have to have any sort of basis in reality. All you have to promise is to create stagnancy. All you have to
yeah,
promise is to like prevent Democrats from improving or changing anything, and then it's appeasing the values of the conservative. It's so easy to come across as genuine when you don't promise anything at all.
yeah,
So that's the problem. We have a bigger it's a bigger ask for us to be completely honest about what we're trying to do and appeal to a broad base of misinformed voters.
yeah. It is, and so I take the executive orders as a big propaganda day about staying focused on the one issues, which is the majority of the executive orders have to deal with immigration. So he kind of like doubled down on immigration is the root cause of all our problems, and immigration is going to be fixed under me, and I'm going to pass all these executive orders. Like I said, the one that I saw had more teeth was the ending of birthright citizenship. As you said, Seth, that's kind of probably going to get struck down by the Supreme Court. Uh, but
Yeah,
it takes a
it
while.
does. It does say in the Constitution,
Hmm?
right?
Yeah, it takes a while.
It does talk about anyway.
What were you saying, Seth?
Oh, I was just saying it does say in the Constitution that like any citizen born in the United States at some point, I remember seeing that. I can't cite it like a Bible verse, but
Yeah, you're right. As
anyway,
long as you're born on your soil, you're an American citizen. That's true. I guess their position is like, well, it was the intent. of the of the case that interpreted that Constitution, the 14th Amendment, essentially was really geared towards ending slavery and giving slaves the right, you know, human rights essentially.
Mhm.
And obviously it was due to the Civil War, but their positioning and their executive order is really talking about, well, that was correct that interpretation, but the interpretation was still too broad because it allowed Mexicans and anyone using the fact that their child was born here, which is predominantly Mexicans. That's why I said Mexican. Uh, Essentially, now automatically has rights as an American citizen. Now, so that's their position. They're saying, well, the Supreme Court went too far, and it should be more narrow as it applies to slavery. Yes, but as it applies to anyone else, no. So if you they listed like three criteria. If you were
Yeah.
yeah, if you were like a nationalized citizen, you had a child, your father was the father of that child, um, was wasn't had no status in the country, and I guess the child is no longer a citizen. I don't know. It sounds ridiculous because it's like technically you can't even ban laws that you can't take someone's right away. It's called an ex post facto law that was legal at the time. So I don't even know how the law even goes into effect. I don't even know how the law goes into effect in the future because the executive order essentially is kind of taking what is, and I'm sorry, I'm put a lawyer hat on for a second. The executive order is essentially taking someone's rights from being a citizen. So you have all these people, technically, if this executive order were to be upheld, are essentially no longer citizens of America, but they're not illegal, right? And they're
Yeah.
not, they have no legal status at all. So you literally have, they're just like people just in this country who were born who falls into one of these criterias who are not who are no longer quote unquote citizens are in limbo state. That's why I don't think that's why I believe that the executive order is going to get struck down because it doesn't make any sense. It's like if they're not citizens, they're not illegal, and they have no legal status. What are they?
Yeah.
And that's what.
And I don't think
Hmm?
I was gonna say I don't think that many of the Trump policies are very well thought out,
Yeah, they're not thought about at
nor
all.
do they really really care about the consequences. It's more about like I don't care. I want to live in a white country. And they don't really care about, because obviously they don't care about the people who suffer from the consequences. So they don't really care about thinking it through. They just think that less white people, it'll be better. Because, in the 50s, things were great. Oh, you've seen all those fancy pictures of the white family in a diner. Oh, if only we could go back to those days. That's the aesthetic that they're just envisioning of a great time of prosperity.
Yeah,
And it's just not an accurate, depiction of what the United States looked like. It's just a fantasy. You know,
but the United States had
it's easier to pin your problems on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no. You're right. It just dependent problem in a group set of group of people. Yeah, I mean, you're 100%
Yeah.
right. I mean, in 1950 America, we're only this this thing. America is a great country, but circumstances matter. We came out for World War II, being the dominant country, not the only dominant country, but British and a lot of the European powers. After being Hitler, were allowed to rewrite the map of the world, and they rewrote it
Pretty
in a
much.
way that gave America dominance and they gave Europeans dominance, which I can't. It's to my benefit as an American that we did that, but at the same time, let's not make it seem like the 1950s was great because the war didn't play a fact. The war was a huge factor in that, and that war was fought with
Yeah.
not just white Americans. It was fought with Italian Americans, Black Americans. It was fought with a lot of Americans. So to be under this idea that the white America established greatness of America, it's BS. The
Hmm.
American greatness came from us winning a war, rewriting the map of the world, and giving ourselves dominance. But that war was only won through the diversity of America. And,
Yeah, I mean the entire entirety of the United States was essentially built off of non-white people
yeah,
through exploitation, and then white people writing the history books,
yeah,
essentially creating the narrative, setting the standard of how things are interpreted and who gets credit for what accomplishments. If they were, it's always the person at the top who gets to
yeah,
decide that stuff, and the person at the top is very rarely there because of meritocracy. It's more because of an existing power that they inherited, or in some way, or gained privilege in some semblance. So it's like throughout history, it's hard to even know what reality
yeah.
is, because it's understandable how the Trump people started off with this fake news. Everything's fake news, and they just confuse themselves into a world of rabbit holes because of just if you go the opposite of what the news is telling you, you can kind of create your own reality and
Yeah.
any sort of existence and sort of facet of possibility becomes a
Yep.
reality. Just if you believe it could be so, it's
Yeah.
so, and they just don't even really have any sort of way to base reality on facts.
Mhm.
So when you present facts, it kind of does not matter at all, because when you're convinced that the facts are created by powerful people, which in a sense they are, then you kind of believe just confirmation, and that's the majority of Americans at this point, clearly, because the majority of Americans voted for Trump. So they live in an alternative reality in which Biden is some corrupt, evil inflation creator, war mongering. I don't know. He did some stuff, some
Hmm.
questionable choices, but in no reality is he more of a threat to Americans than Donald Trump. Nor was Kamala Harris, obviously.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I just believe that, you know, white America built America too. I'm not gonna ever sit there and say white America didn't build America. Just like blacks and Latinos and everybody built America. But what I'm saying is there's certain things that, we need one race needs to stop taking the credit for. America's always been great by
Yeah.
because of our diversity. And our diversity of ideas, our diversity of our culture is what make America unique from any other group of people in the world. And that's why we're the free leaders of the world. But, you know, we have to understand that the focus, and I think Bernie is trying to do this now, if you look at his latest campaigns, the focus that people don't understand is, and this has always been the war, is it's always going to be the haves and the have-nots war. That's just what it is. It's never been a war about white and black. It's always been about who can have it and who cannot have it. And for a very long time, it always was the blacks can't have it. And then it started changing that women can't have it. And then it changed from blacks, women, now black women can't have it. Now it changed to say that even white men, white women can't have it. And then so what we've turned our society into is always going to be the haves and haves not. And right now, Trump supporters are the have nots, thinking that they're the haves, thinking that Trump is going to give me something that I have never been able to achieve in America or my parents can achieve as a white person because I believe that
Yeah.
diversity is the DEI program that was created has stopped me from being who I need to be, or some other program has stopped me from being what I need to be. But the reality is, you were never going to be what you wanted to be because the system is not made for poor white people or black people or Latino people. It's made for rich European descendant people, and that's the conversation we don't want to have.
And and I know it's ultimately like a cringe way to describe it, but it's the more I've been thinking about it, it's the most accurate word. Is it's not about power or freedom necessarily. It's privilege. They're Americans, Republican Americans specifically. Conservatism is always just a projection of their own fears. They're concerned about welfare queens and people living off the system, when it's really they're afraid of somebody having something that they have, which is white people have a certain standard, a certain guaranteed amount of success because of privilege, because of a certain standard that they have above minority people. So when they're afraid of, you know, a lazy subset of society, they're more worried that it's not going to be them. That's really what they're projecting their fears on. It's it's just they have no sense of responsibility, so you kind of deflect that onto the weaker group that they perceive. People like my father, who is currently unemployed,
Yeah.
I swear he lost his job like a month or
Yeah.
two ago, and I think he's just waiting around for Trump to be in office because for some reason in the back of his mind he's convinced that Trump's going to sign these executive orders and all of a sudden jobs are just going to
Yeah.
free up. Like I legitimately think that that's a belief of millions of people. They think that that Trump's got something that up his sleeve that nobody really else knows about. It's just gonna boom one day. There's a million new jobs and they're all well paying because they got rid of all those leeches on the system.
Yeah, and that
When in reality it was always them that there were leeches.
yeah, and so that's what happens when you have leaders who takes an opportunity and takes because Trump is not I don't think Trump's a rocket scientist. He's smart, but he's not a rocket scientist. He
No,
understands that in order to gain real power, you have to divide the people. That's how you gain power. And he understands that. He's a
yeah.
Machiavellian.
Or at least you have to have it's not as much about dividing as much as it is about having an enemy or somebody to pin your
Of
problems on,
course, yeah,
somebody to
yeah.
deflect blame of everything. Even when you're unsuccessful, it has to be somebody else's problem so that they maintain their faith in
Exactly.
you.
So that's a very Machiavellian approach to power. And that is his game. That's his end game. That's what he knows. And so he doubles down on his playbook. And the reality is, all it does is hurt the country in the long run. Because at the end of the day, you spent 8 years, or no, this time 12 years, essentially stating that the problem is not the way our government is structured. The problem is not the way that our economics is structured. It's not the way that the system is constructed to not allow people to rise up from within their set of problems. And we, instead of understanding that systematically America is the worst place it's ever been in terms of the system being broken, we don't address that issue and we make the issue simply an issue of diversity. Instead of saying that the system is broken, we're saying, well, this sensitive group of people is causing problem on the system because the system is fine. America's great. Let's bring America back to the way it
Yeah,
was because the system is working, right? It's just these group of people
yeah,
that is not allowing the system to function the way it's supposed to function. And that's a lie. That's a fallacy because the system in itself is broken. Because right now, this is the most tech oligarchs, that's the words they've been using lately. This
yeah.
is the richest set of subgroup of people who just picked the next president. They literally just the last time this happened, I watched the historic documentary about the last time oligarchs picked the president. I think it was who's the guy?
Was in the 20s.
It was in the 20s.
Is it Warren G. Harding or
I think it was Warren G. Harding's. Yes. So it was a lot. It was the
yeah,
railroad. God, what's this guy's name? Famous
Rockefeller?
Rockefeller, and there was another one. There's like three of them. I think
Um,
Rockefeller, J.P.
yeah,
Morgan, and
Vanderbilt or
the
something.
Vanderbilt. Yeah. So those three, they picked the next president, and that was the last time that's ever happened. That was over 100 years ago,
Yeah.
and so now we just had that
I
happen.
mean, you could argue it happened with Ronald Reagan too. You could even argue it happened with George W. Bush too.
I
There's an
think
argument
I
for
think
that
Reagan and Bush
because
had
Reagan. I
more of
mean,
a
Reagan was.
second.
Yeah, I was gonna say that they have their own charm or whatever, or their own public sphere,
Yeah.
because one was an actor and one was the president's son,
Yeah.
but they were still used for their fame to get to just deliver whatever the corporate world wanted in the presidency, because they were neither of them were ideological people. Reagan was just sort of
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm a Christian, so now I go along with whatever conservatives tell me, and I'll do whatever they tell me because I have dementia. And George H.W. Bush never really cared that much of either. He was just following his father's footsteps,
Yeah.
and he picked Dick Cheney to help him out and pick staffers. Then he, you know, from there on, Dick Cheney represented
Big
big
corporate.
business
Yeah.
in the purest form. He was the executive of, was it Halliburton or something,
Yeah.
or am I thinking of
Halliburton.
that sounds guy?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he literally was an executive put directly into the presidency, the executive office, just like Elon Musk.
Mhm.
They just come in different forms, and that's, I mean, like I said, yes, and Harding in his purest form was also picked, but I think that Trump is also pretty akin to Reagan or W. Bush, because he's just picked for his celebrity.
Mhm.
Well, but it is a unique, different position, because he isn't purely picked for the business world. He was picked by the American people because of his ability to
I
speak
think the
on
business.
racial issues in their.
You talking about Trump?
Go ahead. Yeah,
I think the business world
because
definitely
Trump
helped
is.
him out.
Yeah, no, they definitely. That's what I'm saying. They definitely helped him out,
Mhm.
but I do think he's more unique because he did genuinely strike some sort of racial tension chord in red America,
It-
and I think that that's why he comes across as a little bit less controlled than W. Bush or whatever, because he just does his own shit. He's more of a renegade, but he's also not ideological enough to not be influenced by the business world, by the corporate elites, which is what happened with Elon Musk. He didn't really have a personal, you know,
Yeah.
atmosphere telling him not to just completely let Elon Musk buy the presidency from him.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I think
it's a
you're right.
little bit different.
I think you're right. He does have. Listen, I always say Trump is a businessman, and he's always going to follow what makes sense business wise. That's who he is. And obviously,
Yeah.
that's doesn't make a good president because we want our president to understand social issues just as much as business issues. But I think that what happens with Trump is he tends to think of everything as a business issue. If and he's the problem with business people, and even I fall for it at times. It's a competition. It's in our nature. You're gonna want to always do whatever you can to stay on top, or be relevant, or start to be you know um, better than you were yesterday. And the problem with that mentality in the White House is you're not thinking about how to connect the country, you know, and that's the problem. Because what happens is when you don't want to connect the country, you start to do things like DEI and other things like that that tax a group of people. And the problem with that is once you start attacking other people, eventually it's like someone who gets punched in the face. Eventually they're gonna punch back. And when they do punch
Yeah.
back, that's when the civil war happens in the country. Because you think as much as we gotta look at who we're attacking. We're attacking white women with abortion ban. We're
Yeah.
attacking African American men and women under DEI. We're attacking Latinos under DEI. You're immigrating moms, dads of Mexican families and many Latin communities. So what do you think is going to happen? These people are going to get tireless. They're going to get restless, and that's how civil war starts. And it's not going to be a civil war
Yeah. Or at
from you,
least,
huh?
I'll have to say, sorry, beyond.
Yeah,
Or at least like a severe political opposition, like something that they can't ever get back. Like they think that preserving the white majority is going to, protect conservatism or something like that, because ultimately they're afraid of, other immigrants who don't value freedom in the same way or share different values. Because ultimately the conservative base is an ever growing or ever shrinking base, because inherently they stand for unpopular positions and, you know, represent the business interests that are directly opposed to the working class. Pretty much anybody that has a job is going to be worse off with Republicans. So they have to, they can't win over voters, so it's easier to get rid of the other voters. That's ultimately what this mass deportation thing's about. They are under the delusion that somehow Democrats have been winning because they've been cheating, and that, because non-white people don't like Republicans, that they're tricking non-white people into, or like illegal immigrants into voting or whatever. They're bribing them. Whatever they think is happening, I think is going to be solved by this mass deportation. But what's really happening is they're creating dissidents. They're creating opposition and people that are going to hate conservatism and Republican values for forever and actually care about them. Because right now, like we've said, this is not a problem of more voters like Trump than Kamala. It was ultimately people who showed up to vote. And a lot of people were so uninspired by the Democratic message, or at least what they perceived as the Democratic message, and opposed to Trump, or at least the inconsistency of it.
Yeah.
They just didn't show up to vote. That's why the most votes happened last electoral cycle. Before that was because everybody could just stay home and vote from their house. Just getting people out to spend part of their day voting when they're one of 120 million people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, doesn't seem like you're doing anything. It kind of feels like a waste of time to a lot of people, especially because of the Electoral College and your vote essentially not counting for anything. So ultimately, this is the kind of thing that genuinely is going to boomerang back and backfire against Republicans, because America is a shrinking white majority. Like, the white majority is shrinking. And the more and more that is the message, is preserving a white majority through immigration, all this stuff, the less and less they're going to have that in the long term as a thing to run against or run on. And it's going to taint the Republican image to all these new voters and all these people who are recently actually inspired to do something against the government who's taking away their rights. Like, it's something, it's going to be hard to hide the Republicans taking away their rights in front of their eyes.
So there was a guy, he does this podcast. It's kind of like Joe Rogan, but it's not really Joe Rogan. He's like Iranian descent. I think it's called PvP podcast, something like that.
Oh yeah, Patrick Bet David or
yeah,
whatever.
Patrick Bet David. He had this segment where he talked about how he was like, "Oh yeah, Trump, man, I'm excited about him being inaugurated." And I guess he referenced some kind of American theme. I don't know what it was. Like, I think it was a song or something. Uh, and then someone chimed in. It was a white man, pure MAGA. And he was like, you're not from America. You shouldn't be singing our songs or whatever thing he said. And, Patrick, you said Patrick, what's his name? Patrick Davis, something like that?
Bet
Davis. Yeah. He was just saying, like, he was shocked because he's like Trump's biggest supporter. And his MAGA supporters were like telling him to go back to Iran because he's not from this country. Right? And he is truly is.
Yeah, did you remember seeing that one?
Go ahead.
I was just seeing. Did you see that one video from a couple years back? Maybe it wasn't that long ago. It was Vivek Ramaswamy talking to Ann Coulter.
Yeah.
It was an interview, and she was like, I don't know. She was they were talking about this and that. She's like, "Oh, you're very energetic, and you come across as intelligent." Then she said something really overtly derogatory towards black people or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't remember the context, but then right after that, she was like, "Well, I wouldn't vote for you because you're an Indian," but and then that was just how
I remember that.
He was just like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's like,
and he stood in the Republican Party.
She didn't even do the normal like conservative thing and say like, "Oh, it's because you're not a Christian, you're a Hindu or whatever." No, it's because you're an Indian. She said.
Yeah.
Okay, so because he's not white, literally, and she's been such a prominent figure, Fox News and all the. It's just like all really, really getting hard to deny that Republicans are a white nationalist party. Like, I don't know how people can like to pretend that they aren't. Like, almost all the national figures have white nationalist ideology.
But that's what I'm saying. The rhetoric is getting too much. Like I'm watching this thing on Congress. We have this black, I think she's like from Texas or something, where she's like a black congresswoman. And she's like going back and forth with the
Jasmine
white
Crockett.
congresswoman. Yeah, James
Is it
Scott.
Jasmine Crockett?
What's her name? Jasmine Crockett. Yeah,
Jasmine Crockett.
it's Jasmine Crockett, right? Yeah. So she's going against this white, I guess MAGA Republican white woman, and they're like the white MAGA woman. I can't think of her name. Told
Is it Marjorie
this
Taylor Greene?
what's her name?
Was it not Marjorie Taylor Greene?
No, it was another one. I know. I remember that spat between the two of them, but there
Was
was
it Lauren
another one.
Boebert? It's usually one or the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
And
remember. She wasn't the big MAGA person. She was like a low level one.
oh, one
Like
of
I
low
think I
level.
the low level MAGA. No, so because I don't know her name, so that's why she's low level. But
Sure.
but she's literally threatened to just like, hey, she threatened to go outside to go fight this woman as a congresswoman, and I'm like, you're doing this. You're. What I see is MAGA, which is about 35% of Trump's base. They're trying to create the system where it's like, if you're not white, you're not good enough, right? But in the same time, Trump is trying to say, in the same breath, it's supposed to be a merit-based system, right? And
Yeah.
it's like your camps are not lining up because if MAGA's it wants to be
Yeah. No, you never cared about merit.
hmm?
That's always been a lie. That's always meant you're not in the right racial class,
You're not.
because it's always been racial classism. That's really what it is. It's the tier of you're a white person, then you're like maybe a black
Well,
American,
let's say
or
white.
maybe a
Okay, so
Latino American, and then a black non-American is a lower tier, and then keeps going down until they're
yeah,
a gay, queer, black, you know
yeah, just
Muslim or whatever. You know what I mean? All the things that they hate at the very bottom.
yeah, and to me, it's when you see that, it's just you see the divide there, and the problem is, someone said this, and it's very true, but history always repeats itself. When you look at the Roman Empire, right, at its great days, you know, leading, it was like it was the number one country in the world, and it split into two. It split into the East Roman Empire and the West, which is pretty much, and it's a long story, but short. But essentially, the East was Orthodox Christians, and the West were just traditional Christians. And what happened was it collapsed because of these two ideologies, and these people couldn't work together for the
Mm-hmm.
great good of Rome. And I see America, we're doing the same thing. We're East, West, Democrat, Republican, and
Yeah.
Republicans are saying we can't work with them because we don't believe that they're on our level and they should only be white people. And then you're creating a subgroup. So what happens? Country collapse again. Because what happens is now you have white people on one corner, which is about 50, no, that's probably not the most accurate number, but it was 60%, prior to like 50% white dominant country now, right? And then you have 40% of minorities, or 43 or 44% minorities in this camp. And so what you're having now is you're having this essentially culture wars and all these wars among each other. It's to the point now you're going to have this country's going to split. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, it's not true. The countries we're strong as we always will always be. But the reality is that's a fallacy because every country think they're going to stay the same. And the reality is when you have someone elected like Trump and people in his MAGA base speaking what they're speaking, you're creating two countries. Because reality is one side of the country believes in white dominance, the other side of the country believes in diversity. And now we're clashing with each other because it's like this is not Seth, you froze on me. You can hear me though? Seth? Oh, Seth. All right, guys, we had a little technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get. All right, so Seth went away for a little bit. So, well, as we try to get Seth back, I know we have 5 minutes left on the show, so we're probably going to close a little bit early today. Um, and then I'll try. We're going to try to get Seth back on next week. So I just want you guys I want to thank you guys for imagining more.